They burnt in 1903, never to be rebuilt.
So what was the first school and what were the first teachers' qualifications for teaching? Well, it's difficult to establish the first school, but it's said to have been Canada Hill School, which is out on Bauer Road, and I believe this is 40th?
36.
36.
36. And that little church you see in the background is still there. Both of these buildings are still there
And,
as of 2019.
yeah. And this photograph, probably about 1980 or 90, you can see that the building is still sound. But now, the Grange, Jenison
Grange.
Georgetown Grange, used to meet in this building, but it was sold to a private person, and they have remodeled it, and it's looking quite good.
They tried to keep as much of the interior as they could, the way it was, but they, it is still part of their house, I think, because they've added a garage onto it now.
This school was known as the Hare
Grout.
School,
Hare
and
Grout.
then it became the Hare Grout School. Well, it was first a log cabin, and it was located here at the curve of where Cottonwood turns into Fillmore at 20th Avenue. But it was the log cabin was condemned, wasn't safe to use, so they went to the Hare Landing and continued the schooling, but then they decided they wanted to refurbish this and put grout on the outside and stiffened up the walls, and it became known as the Hare Grout School. So those were two very early schools, but we're talking about a single room school in areas situated so that people, farmers and their kids, could go within walking distance. Here's Cottonwood, also could be called the Jenison School.
Basically, it was known as number 6.
Number 6.
That's what they pretty much called it.
And this was where Cottonwood and Baldwin come together. And there you can see a graduating class, or not graduating, but attending class.
That was the whole school.
That was the whole school body.
Yeah.
Up until the 6th or 7th grade, maybe 8th grade.
Maybe 8th grade, because in those days, when you got what they figured was the 8th grade, they give you a test. If you passed the test, you got a diploma. If not, you stuck around another year, or if you wanted to. And sometimes, like when my mother taught there, she had kids that were almost as old as she was that kept on going until they got their diploma.
Sand Hill School, and notice it's Sand Hill School instead of Sandy Hill. Sand Hill School was established at the top of the hill on Baldwin, and it burned, and then instead of rebuilding there, they built it out at 20th and Baldwin, and this is the building that they built there. And Sand Hill School still has a reunion once in a while. The building itself, Sand Hill, which here's another photograph in the winter time. You can see that the bell tower has been added. But when they decided to build present-day Sandy Hill School, they sold this building, and it was moved over to Baldwin,
Solomon's Porch.
Ridgewood, I believe. And today it's part of the Solomon Porch complex. But this was the Baptist Church where it started. And then later they built the building that has become Solomon's Porch, and that happened in 1957 when they built or moved this school there. Other schools, well, we got Chrysler School out in the end of Fillmore at 42nd.
And
And that's was on the corner of Fillmore and 42nd. Here's a small group of kids, all from the local
There
area.
wasn't a lot of, Chrysler might have started early because of the Blended Landing area. But when the Blending Landing sawmill and stuff disappeared, there wasn't that many farms out there, so there wasn't a very big school.
Mhm. Well, as Gene mentioned already, Barwood School started as Georgetown Consolidated Schools in 1952. This was an attempt to pull all of these one-room schools into a local area, one building. Today, of course, it's much larger than it was. The original building is way back here. But Georgetown Consolidated Schools, I think the first high school classes were held there, and then the junior high building was built, and then the high school building. So there was a vote of the citizens of the Georgetown area. Did they want to call it Georgetown Consolidated Schools, or did they want something else? And it turned out that Jenison Public Schools was then decided on instead of Georgetown Consolidated. Another school, which is not part of our school district, but Shack Huddle is now part of Hudsonville Schools, and here you can see the wooden building, which later burned, and a brick building was built.
Well, no, that's the Hanley building,
Oh, excuse me.
and that became part of the Granville School District.
And the Handley School, which was over by the Handley Cemetery, is part of Granville. So that's the way it goes. But did you notice how similar the student bodies
Mm-hmm.
are? You got a lot of little ones and then some older ones, but if you were smart enough, you could graduate and be done.
Be done.
At 8th grade. But if you want to go on to high school here in Jenison, what did you have to do?
Well, you had to pass the test. The 8th grade were given a test, and basically my dad claims that he took it when he was supposedly in the 6th grade, passed it, they gave him a diploma, and that was the end of his school career. He went back to work on the farm. But these schools were very, very independent, because Shack Huddle didn't want to join Hudsonville, Bursley didn't want to join Georgetown, and Hanley really didn't want to go to Granville, but they wanted to remain independent. They didn't want to be under a blanket, so to speak, without their control, because each one of these little schools had like a 3-member board that ran that school, and they were afraid to give up their control over their local schools.
Now, the Bursley School is a good example of what you just talked about. And Bursley School remained its own independent school up until the 50s. And they had their own school board separate from Georgetown. Now here on the map you can see where all the different schools, starting at the Chrysler School, the Grout School, here's the Canada Hill School and Bowerwood School, the number 6 Jenison School, and Sand Hill School. We've got Bursley School here, and the Handley School, and Shack Huddle, and also we have the Christian School, which started right here in downtown Jenison. The Jenison Christian School started in the in the basement of First Church. Then, because the congregation of the Congregational Church moved to Granville, the building was available, and First Church bought it and established the Jenison Christian School in 1938. You can see the front window here has been the same, and this shows one wing pointing out to the west, and this shows the west wing and east wing with that same building in the middle. And then it was later the wooden structure was torn down and it became one long Christian school until they moved up on Baldwin to a building very similar to the old junior high called Greenfield. The junior high building here was on Church Street.
Church Street.
And the old.
And this Church Street, by the way, was not named after, because it ran into where the Christian Reformed Church was. It was named after a fellow named Church that lived up in the other, up towards the Hare Landing. That's how it got its name.
And this was at the corner of School Street and Church Street.
Right.
And the local joke is that there were no schools located on School Street and no churches located on Church Street. Teacher qualifications were largely handled by the county. And here you can see a sample of contracts agreed to. Teachers had to show up and stoke the fire, keep the place clean and neat. And the school district would supply the building and send the kids there.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another contract.
This is my mother's contract in 1927. Now, you notice that the date on here is the 18th of August in 1927. My mother was born on the 28th of August in 1909. So that made her just shy of her 18th birthday when she signed this contract, and she'd already had 1 year at Western Normal School, as they called it those days.
For training teachers.
For training teachers.
And this was part of that training that ladies especially had to be prepared.
They wanted to make sure that you wanted to be a teacher before you went 4 years and decided you didn't want it.
Because in some of these smaller schools, you could have a student who might be older than you are.
Right, and my mother did have students that were the same age as her. One other thing that you notice, a lot of people have heard the joke about the all-made school teachers. My mother taught until 1935 at number 6 school in Jenison. Then she got married in the summer of 35 and she couldn't teach. Well, as we saw earlier, the Shackle School didn't have a teacher, so they asked my grandfather, who was the Jenison board member, if he knew anybody. He said, yeah, my daughter, but she just got married, so she can't teach. Well, they said they'll make an exception until they could find a teacher. But it wasn't until 1943 that a single woman could teach schools. If you were a widow, you could teach.
Mm-hmm.
But if you hadn't been married, you couldn't teach. That's where the joke, the old maid school teachers, came from.